Hello, I'm Lisa Loomis with Mad River Valley TV. And with me today in the studios is Waitsfield dairy farmer Elwin Neill, and we're continuing conversation we had a couple weeks ago about milk prices in Vermont. Hello, Elwin. Thanks for coming.
Yes, glad to be back again.
I heard a lot of good feedback.
Well, I'm thrilled that I'm a repeat performer here.
Today, I wanted to talk to you about, you had mentioned to me on the phone about a new insemination technique and how it might impact supply.
Yes, there's a couple things in the industry, and it's not only affects the dairy industry, but affects the beef industry. It can too. But one is genomics, and there's probably some people that are familiar with it, but
I am not. I think you might want to explain it.
In kind of a nutshell, genomics is the ability to DNA test and have a scorecard or markers from the DNA testing of beef cattle or dairy cattle or anything. So say there was an infant calf born, they could take a hair sample or a skin sample, DNA test it. They could come back with a test that would tell you the probability on a very high percentage of what the production or the transmitting ability of that cow would be even before she gets into the milk string and has any production at all. And the other side of that is that they can also do that to male offspring, which would be bulls that would go into an AI production or would go in to have semen production. So what they can do now is they can take the very best offspring, DNA test them that they think may be, or they could test maybe 10 animals and pick the very best of the females that would be the projections from those could be, they could take the best of that, or the cream of the crop, as they call it in the industry.
The industry, yes.
And then they could also do this genomic testing on the bulls, on the bull calves, on the male calves. So when they get into old enough to have semen production, they can harvest that semen. They can then breed those to the very best of the
milk producers.
Yeah. So normally this process would be, what used to take this process would be in a 5 to 6 year range. They can do it in probably the length of time it grows those animals. It takes you to grow those animals to get them into production. So a female could be in production within 2 years. She could be in the milking string within 2 years. And the bulls, they probably can start harvesting the semen out of them at a year, I would guess, or before. So what does that do to the milk supply, milk industry, or the dairy industry? It does several things. It'll give a whole range of options to dairy farmers or beef farmers that would take a much longer time to achieve. But what the impact it could have on the dairy industry is that they are finding, by the use of gender-selected semen, I guess I could step back here and continue out the scenario of the best of the best here.
Yeah.
What that'll do is that will select the highest producing, the highest, and it isn't just production, it's longevity. They can have markers for. They know what they're going to be type-wise, if they're going to have good feet, legs, udder, what their stature is going to be, temperament. They have all of those. This research started back in probably the 1980s with USDA, and then it kind of got shifted to a private firm through the 90s, and it's developed from there. Now the impact of that is in that alone, by mating or having the best females mated to like the best bulls, you'll end up with offspring from them, which should be, quite a step higher, but it will be without the risk of the long range having to achieve that, having to achieve the production or having to achieve the results. So what that possibly can do just in that could add to milk supply, just because you have a more efficient cow and more efficient animal. Now some people say, well, geez, maybe we shouldn't do that. Well, the more efficient cow you have probably leaves less of a carbon footprint than the less efficient cow.
So that's my question. Wouldn't that ultimately save a farmer money?
Yes.
Because you normally take 5 to 10 years to develop your strains of cows or
Right.
your breed of cow, and to figure out which one is the high yield and which one to mate with which one. You're just speeding up your own process, right?
Yeah, it could. It'll speed up the industries or even the breed process.
So you don't
It
have to
should.
waste your time on non-producing cows, which
Well, you shouldn't have to. The cost to do this DNA testing is about $250 per animal. I could take and have some of my cows, tested, but it's like about $250 charge. If you looked at, I think if somebody looked at their overall cost of raising, each individual, each heifer calf that came along, and some of those were duds or some of them didn't produce and they weren't, the peak or the, the cream.
it's more than $250,
yeah,
right?
I'm sure it's more than $250. And the industry is just really getting geared up with this genomic sires. And what that gives you is the ability with a very high percentage of success to choose a sire that has no daughters on the ground, but yet he has a proof. They can tell the probability of what his milk, projection will be.
From one of his daughters.
No, not even from his daughters, just from his DNA.
Wow.
So, it's kind of it's really getting going and getting geared up. This aspect of it, I've actually just purchased, in the last couple of months, some genomic sires and used. And I did it kind of as not really an experiment, but I purchased 2 bulls, identical. They should be identical. So if you had these 2 bulls on the normal sense, they would be like identical or identical twins. They're full brothers, whatever. You would think, well, their genetics are going to be pretty same. DNA tested both of them. They're not the same on milk. They're not the same on type. They're not the same. They're not the same on their ability to transmit protein, butter, fat, solids, anything like that. They're close, but they're not identical. So I purchased both of them, and I've used both of them. So we'll see,
In a year?
Well, not in we won't be in a year.
Won't.
We'll have to go through the whole time frame of having the calves, 9 months having the calves, then 2 years till when they calve the first time to find out.
Okay.
I mean, you still have that, but we could DNA sample those calves when they hit the ground in 9 months, and we could find out if one or the other of them had more transmitting ability just from the DNA testing.
So this will allow farmers to make their operations more efficient.
I would think it certainly lends itself to being able to, to have that option. Then you don't have to raise, everybody. You could actually, select from
which ones to bring to.
Right, and then you could breed them to a genomic sire that looks like it may have the ability to, have greater production potential from those offspring.
So then, let's talk about then what that will do to the milk supply in the country.
Well,
fewer farmers with fewer cows with more milk, right?
Yes, but then again, it may be a good thing because then you'll have adequate production from less production units, and there again, people are worried about the carbon footprint of cows. You would have less cows, so the overall herd would be less, so your carbon footprint should be reduced. People that are concerned about that. The other aspect is using gender-selected semen. So you have these bulls that are out of these DNA-tested cows, out of the DNA-tested sires. So you can take the semen from these bulls now and have it gender-selected. It's a process they go through. So you can have, the offspring can be 80 to 90% females. So if you use gender-selected semen that for the female side, where you want more heifers, now you can have 80 to 90% more, or 80 to 90% heifer ratio, which normally it's about 48%. So now you have this, cream of the crop cow. Twice. And now you can have 80 to 90% of them can be that. So that, in effect, may have just gender-selected semen may have more of an effect on milk production or milk supply than, the genomics. But you take those two things together, which are pretty exciting. the amount of extra heifers, according to an article that I read in Horde's Dairyman, and it's a low percentage. They figure that maybe in 2008, 2009, the amount of gender-selected semen that'll be used on all the cows in the country of semen that they're using that is going to inseminate these cows, maybe in the 20% range. So then they took in factors of all the heifer calves that will be born, not from gender-selected semen, from the normal. Yeah. And the extra, they subtracted that from their projected number, and they figure that maybe in 2011 that there could be as many as 300,000 extra heifers entering the milk string in the country just from the use of 20% of gender-selected semen today.
So that is a supply issue then, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Right.
So, right now they want to take 300,000 cows out of the milk stream to help raise the milk price because, the milk price, they figured that's that much more oversupply than what, than what is needed right now. So, in a year and a half, they figured that, some people believe, and, they've done the numbers that
there could
you
be
can add 300,000 back in a year and a half.
Let's say the correct number of milking cows in the country is 500,000. I'm just making up that number. And then you add 300 to it, and then you add the hyper efficiency productivity of these creme de la creme cows, right?
Yeah, right.
So that would lead to a greater oversupply, but then ultimately wouldn't it lead to, in 10 years, wouldn't it lead to 10, or wouldn't it lead to many fewer cows making the same amount of milk?
It very well could be. There's two ways that, there's, like you said, there could be less, it could be more. There's two ways that this could go. But I think if they incorporated a supply management with it, that I think for the dairy industry, you could milk the same amount of cows. If somebody wanted to expand, they can milk the same amount of cows in 2, 3, 4, 5 years that they're milking now, but they could actually
increase their output, right?
They could increase their output, but they could also increase their efficiency, because if you can make the same amount of milk, from cows that are, genetically
from fewer cows
that are genetically
less hay,
better,
less, right?
Right. They're
less
going to, and I'm sure that they're going to be able to select these cows, these animals, on efficiency, how they convert feed. If they convert feed efficiently. So I think I think it's kind of exciting.
So do you have any philosophical issues with genetic engineering? Does it?
Well, they're really not genetic. It's really not genetically.
It's just testing.
It's really not genetically engineered. It's just.
Well, except for the sex selection, right? That's engineering.
Well, that's kind of mechanically. I mean,
sure, right.
I think they select it because they do it by specific gravity. That the male sperm are actually heavier than the female sperm. So they used to centrifuge it. They used to centrifuge. That was the way they did it to start with. They centrifuged it. But now I think they have, electronic equipment. Nobody's really given it up how they do it. So they have electronic equipment that can do that same process that probably used to take a long time. Up until the downturn in the market, they had 70 machines that were processing 24/7, and they were putting out something like in the range of 4 million units a year. Of course, that's dropped. They've taken probably...
A unit is what it takes to inseminate a cow?
Yeah, and those are, depending on which bull stud you get them from, some of them are 1 cc straws and some of them are half cc straws. So that's a big industry in itself. When you pay 30...
that used to be government run, but now it's private?
No. The USDA did the research on gender selecting. They did the research to develop how to gender select the sperm.
And now it's back in private industry.
Yeah. That
whole thing. So let's go back to the co-op. We talked about the milk co-op to which you belong.
Yep.
Last time we talked, and does that co-op negotiate directly with Dean Foods in Texas?
No, they are independent from them. They market their own cheeses, milk, and stuff.
And how many
the only-
people are in this co-op? How many? You mentioned the number last time. How many farmers are in it? It's a
boy.
it's a national co-op, though, right?
No, Agrimart's the Northeast Co-op.
Okay.
It tends to just take care of just the Northeast dairy farmers, some New York State farmers, but it's based out of Massachusetts, and it's Northeast, just in the Northeast.
So does it function as an agent or as a representative for
Well,
you guys,
well,
for its members?
yes, it does. I guess that would be the simple answer. Yes, but
Okay.
see, the Agrimark members actually own, Cabot, McAdam, and all of those lines. Plus, they process the milk into, powdered dry fat
Component parts, right?
component parts and stuff.
Yeah.
And they market those. They market those themselves. They don't. Sometimes they'll have to get pool milk, or they have pool milk that goes. That's a whole another day's worth of
Talking.
subject that I need somebody smarter than me to tell you all the way
Well,
way the milk moves, and the marketing strategy, and what goes into the pool and what doesn't go into the pool.
Well, what's the relationship of Dean Foods, the Texas company that takes 70% of the milk from the Northeast?
Well, Dean Foods controls 70% of the national milk.
What does that mean, they control it?
Well, through either their associates or their like St. Albans Co-op is actually Dean Foods. So St. Albans Co-op is merged. You can either call it merged or bought or whatever, but they have agreements with a lot of co-ops, but they do not have one with Agrimark. They have, but St. Albans Co-op is a Dean Foods co-op. They either have an agreement with them or they own them, one or the other. But they control that milk market. But Dean Foods, from what I understand, they control something like 70% of the national milk market.
So that's how they're able to affect the prices so completely.
Yep.
And you have no collective bargaining power against them, or are they just too big?
Well, milk price ends up being kind of a national or an international thing, and Bernie Sanders thinks that Dean Foods is affecting it somewhat, or he even thinks that there may be some antitrust problems with it. But the world market, I would think that the world market would have affected that also. That it's so global. It's my feeling that it's so global that it it's hard for. Maybe Dean Foods is affecting it globally. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like they could globally because the world economy dropped so, and and exports dropped, because I'm sure that Dean Foods would want to export as much as they possibly could have. And I'm sure that if they've got that much milk market, that they're affected by this too, but we don't know to what degree, and we don't know to what degree any of these marketing people, what their margin is. So we know what we're getting paid, and we know that stuff in the store, and as I spoke last time, the fluid market, which includes fluid milk, cheese, butter, and cheese, butter, ice cream. Ice cream. I don't want to forget ice cream. I don't know how I forgot ice cream. So anyway. Those are a very small piece of the pie of what the total milk is, as we discussed last time. So, the other thing is like non-fat dry milk,
and
all
what was
those
that
other
product? The something dry product. There was a 3-letter acronym that was referred to the dried whey products or something.
Right.
The component derivative
protein.
parts.
The protein.
Oh, protein derivative.
Right. Yeah,
parts
I can't
or
remember
something
what
like
it
that.
is
As long
either,
as it's not credit default swaps, I don't care.
Yeah. But anyway, that is a huge, that's a lot bigger piece of the pie of the total milk supply than is just the fluid market. And I think consumers look at the fluid market, the price in the store, and the difference between what's getting paid at the farm and the price at the store, and there is a spread there, and it's a big spread, and it hasn't really dropped with the price, but if you did do the research, it has dropped some it has
The
dropped
price
some.
in the store for a
Yes.
gallon of milk? What is a gallon of milk in the store? I don't actually know.
I don't know. I don't buy
$4 probably?
it. I don't buy it. Depends on what you buy.
Of course you
if
don't buy it.
if you
Oh, yeah.
buy if you buy BST free milk, the last report I heard, and I get it from the American Dairy Line. It's on it. Anybody that wants to listen to DEV 20 minutes to 6 in the morning every
Yeah.
morning, 5 days a week. You can get a good picture of where cheese, butter, barrel cheese, block cheese, and they sell it by the carloads. Goes on the Chicago Board of Exchange, and you can also listen to that and get the milk futures prices out, into even to the fall where they think, and that's Class 3 price, and then you can figure it'll be Class 1 price or blend price that farmers get paid around here is probably $1.50, maybe $1.75 above what the class, probably about $1.50. Ahead of above whatever the futures is for Class 3. So if anybody's interested, they can listen to that
They
at
can
20
get
minutes.
themselves
They
a
can
prize.
listen to that at 20 minutes at 6 in the morning. But also on there, sometimes they give the trends, and they'll talk about how they have had people on there talking about the trends and what milk price was and what the different brackets of milk, whether it was just regular whole milk, not BST free milk, organic skim, conventional skim, and all of those. And actually organic, the last one I heard, organic and BST free milk were actually at about the same price
As
and-
conventional milk.
well, BST free conventional
Yeah.
milk and organic were at about
Yeah.
the same price. They were at the top of the scale, and then it dropped down from there of just whole milk, skim
Yeah.
milk,
Do you
whatever
think
it was.
that Bernie Sanders' efforts to lobby the Secretary of Agriculture and also Congressman Peter Welch has jumped into the fray now as well to try to lobby for increased milk supports, pricing supports. Do you think that will have any impact, or do you hold out any hope for that for 2009?
Things move pretty slow in Washington.
Yeah.
I think it's going to have some effect. I think it's going to bring awareness to the problem. I think that there's senators that are aware of it. I was listening on the news this morning. They've signed on 50 senators or congressmen or something on to, trying to get higher support prices or to do something. It's not a regional problem. It's a national problem. And we're always hopeful, to get some relief from it, but my misgivings, I guess my fear is that, there's so many farms that have borrowed a ton of money to get through this, and they've got to have a good return, or they've got to have a stabilized milk price for an extended period of time. They can't just cover the cost, because these people that have borrowed a lot of money are going to be operating, they're going to be operating in a long time to pay those loans. But the difference in the milk price from what it is now to what it should go to is going to be such that they're going to eat that up,
Right.
paying off the loans
Right.
for, an extended period
Right.
of time. So, we get back to the supply management issue again, and if, it continues to be more milk into the market than the market can bear, then I don't see the milk price improving very
It's a
rapidly.
chicken and an egg thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, either somehow somebody figures out how to control national milk supply, or not to regulate it, and then prices could be stable for 10 years or 15 years.
Yeah, and the other thing too is if they give each farm a base or a basis, of production, or historical base of what they're at or what they've been at, say in the last 3 to 5 years, if you take an average or whatever like that. And I think if they do something like that, then the farmers should own that base, because then if the co-op or if a milk marketing company owns that base, then if you go out of business, then
Somebody else can
they can
buy up your.
they can give that base to somebody else, or
So
the co-op
let me
can sell
make sure
it
I
by.
understand that. Let's say your base at your farm should be what, 10,000 gallons? I don't know,
Well,
give me a number.
our base would be in like 1,600,000 a year, 1,600,000
Okay, and
pounds,
so when
somewhere
you
in
say
there.
you own it, what does that mean?
Well, that should be the farmer's base. You know, he owns that. He produces that milk. He should own that base. In Canada, they have a quota system, and the farms own the quotas. So, like,
Okay.
that is their.
So you own it, not Agrimart, not your
Right.
co-op. And so if you go out of business,
You own it. It becomes an equity. It becomes an asset.
I see. Okay, so you can sell.
Right.
Oh, I see. I got it. It's
Yeah.
it's a commodity.
It's a commodity,
it's
and it
something-
should be a commodity because
It's like
I
a
feel
pollution offset. You can sell it to someone else.
right. If somebody wants to expand or get into the business, but the other thing is, you know, if you don't do that and you don't have a base to go with some of these farms, say I go out of business, and in 5 years' time somebody wants to come in and milk cows at my farm. Now there's no base for that farm.
So
You
how
know,
does that
say,
person get into
you know,
the
like
industry,
Kendall
right?
Maynard's farm? Somebody buys that and wants to milk cows there. You know, there won't be a base for that farm. So do they have to buy into this base? You know, does that become a prohibitive factor? You know,
Sure. To
in
somebody getting into
somebody
farming.
getting into it. But also, you know, a dairyman that has a base and he sells his cows or he retires, you know, he should own that base, and that should be a
The
commodity.
right to produce that number of gallons
Right,
per
because
year.
that could be a huge equity thing, either to sell that base or it could be a huge valuable equity item for that farm.
Sure, the farm
So-
then runs, that gallonage runs with that farm,
You know,
right?
if somebody comes in and wants to buy the farm to milk cows, and then, oh, well, it's got a base. Well, that's a good
So
thing.
something like this is done in Canada and it works successfully?
Yeah, they have a quota system in Canada.
Uh-huh.
You know, each farm has a quota. They aren't supposed to milk over that. If they do, they get penalized if they make over that. But they own those quotas. The
So
farm owns the quotas.
What does that do to a free market economy? I mean,
Well,
shouldn't you, if you have a 1.6 million base and Forest comes on board and you guys want to work twice as hard and be very efficient with your semen selected and right in your creme de la creme, so there's no incentive for you to, I mean, where is the incentive for you then? Just to become more efficient and make more money?
well,
or-
you can, you know, there's still the opportunity to expand, but it's going to cost you, if the market is flooded, it's going to cost you to expand into the market. A lot of organic
Oh,
guys.
you'd have to buy in.
You could buy in.
To increase your
You could buy-
base from
you could-
1.6.
You
Okay.
could, you could buy into it is one of the plans where you could buy into it. You'll end up having to pay a marketing fee to move and market that other milk. So yeah, you can. There's some organic guys that are under that now. So I was talking with our DHA supervisor this morning. He was there and, you know, sampled and weighed and tested the cows last night and this morning. But he was talking about an organic farmer that he goes to and does DHI testing for. And he's been expanding, but he can produce at his quota, or he can produce at, you know, what his contract is for under his organic milk, and then the rest of the milk goes at market price, you know, whatever the market
see.
is now. So if you average that out, you know, he's still making money,
Yeah.
but he's not making as much money as he would have if he, on per hundredweight basis,
Yeah.
if he stayed, but he's actually making probably more money because he can average
Right.
what
So
the overage is compared
Yeah.
to what his base was, and he's still at a higher percentage.
So why does an
Above
idea
market.
like this not take off?
Well, I don't think that things have been desperate enough,
Uh-huh.
you know, in the national milk supply, desperate enough. And I think they are now. I think nationally people, they realize that they've got to do something with supply, or they're going to be on this roller coaster forever. And a good example is what I suggested, that, you know, if milk price rebounds a little bit now, then, you know, with the use of, you know, gender selected semen, it could, you know, you could end up with more animals in the marketplace, in the milk string in,
Right.
you know, 2 or 3 years. The other thing, you know, that could be a downside, but the other thing that could be good about that technology is that you'd be able to respond to the demand a lot quicker.
Sure.
So if,
Right.
you know, if...
Because you're 9 months away from.
Right.
What's the time from when a cow is born till when?
2 years.
2 years till
2
it's,
years.
till it's
but,
producing.
But you could respond a lot quicker to, you know, demand in the marketplace with that technology. You
Wow.
could expand, you know, you could expand your production, you know, quicker with, with the genomics.
That's pretty exciting. It is also a double-edged sword. I can see that it could glut the market. But it's interesting to think that you could really, the same way when we were talking the first time we talked about how you tinker with the percentages of the feed you give the animals to change the butter fat in their milk. It's interesting to think that you could continue to make your operation more efficient and more streamlined and really more focused on just production, and without all that other work.
Well, yeah, but you got to have all the other work too.
Well,
So, but this is an aspect that's out there. It's an aspect that could be a great tool, for a lot of dairymen. And I think in the long run, I think it'll probably be good for the industry, because it'll, I think in the long run it'll probably, lessen the amount of cows that are needed.
Yeah.
I would hope that it would be, and they'll just be more durable. They'll be more
durable.
Well, really, I mean,
Yeah,
cows are under a lot of stress. Cows hearts are huge, and they circulate at peak production sometimes 700 to 800 pounds of blood just for 1 pound of milk. So
Really?
those cows are under a lot of stress, even when they're comfy, even when they're fed well. They're stressed.
Ethically treated.
Even the happy cows are.
It's a lot of work. It's physically a lot of work
for them. It's a lot of work for them. So then, you want them to have good feet, you want them to have good legs so they can get around, they don't have problems. All of those are expenses if they have problems with their feet or legs or whatever, those are all factors that enter into it. And, if they're healthy and if they, if they're mobile, then they can, they're just more efficient.
Yeah.
It's like anybody. I mean, somebody going around.
If we're healthy and we're mobile.
Yeah,
we're
I mean,
more
if you're
efficient.
walking around on with one crutch or with a pair of crutches or something, you aren't hanging a lot of paper. So
We are out of time, Elwin.
So.
I'm Lisa Loomis with Mad River Valley TV, channel 44 and 45 in Waitsfield, and with me today in the studio is Waitsfield dairy farmer Elwin Neill, continuing what will probably end up being an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, that would be good.
About dairy farming in Vermont. Thank you, Elwin.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching.